and welcome to Meet SRU Faculty. I'm Emily Sell, and today I'm joined by Dr. Cornelius Cosgrove, Chairperson of the English Department. Hello, Dr. Cosgrove. Nice to have you on today.
Sure, you can call me Dr. Cosgrove, you can call me Neil, you can call me... Only my mother calls me Cornelius, and that was only when she was mad at me. Right?
All right, so let's get started. Our first question is, the English department and English in general covers a broad area of topics. So what specific classes do you teach?
Well, I've been here since 1987, so I've taught a lot of different classes, but primarily right now I'm teaching courses in composition and rhetoric and college writing course and advanced research writing, which is kind of a capstone course for our writing majors. But I've taught interpreting literature, I've taught technical writing, I've taught some graduate courses, but right now that's my focus is composition and rhetoric and the advanced research writing.
All right. So you have a couple different degrees in different subject areas. So could you tell us a little bit about each of your degrees?
Well, I always use this as an illustration when students come into my office and say they don't know what they want to do with their life yet, right? And then I remind her that, even probably 80% of the population is in that situation. But when I started in college, I was a history major, and I got a bachelor's degree in history. But there was a lot of writing in history. I enjoyed writing, and by the time I got to my senior year, I thought that I would try journalism. So I got into a journalism graduate program, a master's in journalism, and I went to Pennsylvania State University for that, and I got an MA in journalism. Now, after I got through doing that, I worked for a couple of years on a couple of different newspapers, but by that was enough time for me to realize that I really did want to go into teaching and education. And so when I completed that, I started working towards my certification, for secondary education. Because of my background, I could get it in both English and social studies. However, after 3 years of teaching in a high school, I was hired to teach at a community college, writing and literature courses. So when I got hired to do that, I looked around for a PhD program. I figured since I was now out of high school and into a community college that I should maybe start working towards a doctorate. And I was recruited kind of into a program at the University of Buffalo in English education. And the reason I was interested in that is because they were studying the teaching of writing. And a lot of traditional English departments at that time were still very much focused on literature and studying literature and literary criticism and so on. And so I went into that PhD program. So that's how I ended up getting 3 degrees in 3 different areas.
Yeah, wow. So from history to journalism to English.
Right.
All right. So would your advice for students be then to just follow your interests and it'll lead you to where you want to be?
Yeah, I think an awful lot of students when they come in to the university aren't completely sure what their interests are.
Mm-hmm.
And, they even, now people when they start talking about how to prepare students for the work world and for careers, they oftentimes say, well, a student who graduates now is going to have 5 or 6 different careers anyway. It's just that I was doing that 35, 40 years ago. So. So the thing is that you don't know exactly what you're going to end up doing. And whatever you do, you're probably not going to end up doing the same thing for 40 or 50 years anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So probably it's not a bad idea to get to develop knowledge and abilities in more than one area.
So exploring is definitely a good thing. And speaking of exploring, one of your past jobs took you to the Bahamas, is that right?
Yes, when I decided I wanted to go into teaching, I didn't have certification yet. So I couldn't really get hired at the secondary level in the United States. But I had a couple of people that I knew from a summer camp that I used to work at who were teaching in Nassau in a private high school. And they told me they needed teachers down there. That was only about a year after they had gained independence from Great Britain. And they were looking for expatriate teachers. And so I applied through their Ministry of Education, and then I got hired to a 3-year contract to teach there. It's much like students frequently nowadays they graduate and they're picking up jobs teaching English, for instance, in Asia and other places.
So I'm guessing the weather was better in the Bahamas than here at
I
Slippery
grew up
Rock?
in Buffalo, New York. It was nice to spend 3 years without winter, yes.
Yeah.
But you know, that wasn't the main reason why I went down there. They gave me a job.
Yeah. So you publish articles in scholarly journals. So can you tell us about your most recent publication?
Yeah, my most recent publication was a couple of years ago, where I had taken a sabbatical in the 2008-09 academic year, and I developed a study that focused on program assessment of programs with a strong emphasis on writing. I wanted to find out what graduates of Slippery Rock who had gone through one of those programs had done with in terms of what they were doing at the current time in their jobs and as citizens and everything as far as writing was concerned. So I developed a survey that I sent out to probably about 400 or 450 graduates, and I got about a little more than probably, maybe it wasn't that many. I got about a return rate of about 28, 29%, which is usual. And I got, from those questions, I also found about 18 of those alumni who were willing to do extensive interviews with me regarding the writing that they were doing. And so I found out a lot about, the whole idea was to use that kind of a study to influence what kind of a curriculum you would have and what kind of teaching you would do, what you would do in your teaching with students who had gone through programs with an emphasis on writing like that. In fact, I took 2 programs from the communications department, the one in journalism and the one in public relations, and also the graduates of our 2 writing tracks in the English department, creative and professional, and also literature majors. And what I came up with was some interesting material about what we should put into the curriculum of those kinds of programs and things that we should remember while we're teaching them. That involved how people go about doing research in their different jobs, what kind of writing they did, and what kind of tools they use for their writing. And I managed to get that written up and get it published in probably what is the largest circulation, most prestigious journal for people who teach writing in universities and colleges. Because they were interested in that. They were interested in what I found out, obviously, in terms of what those former students of ours, those graduates, were doing in terms of their own writing now, after they had graduated and been out of school for a few years.
Yeah, that sounds like quite a project.
Yes, it was.
And an honor to have it published in such a prestigious journal.
Yeah, well, you work for those things.
Yeah, yeah. So other things that you work for, I understand that you won an award fairly recently. In 2006, it was the SRU President's Award for Scholarly and Creative Achievement. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
I won that with another faculty member, and it was because it was a co-written book that Dr. Barta Smith, who's also in the English department, and I did, and was published in 2004. And it focused on the role of writing in undergraduate education. And for that one, there was a lot of material that, of course, we pulled out of other scholarship in that area about writing across the curriculum, writing in different disciplines. But we also interviewed, did extensive interviewing with faculty members from different departments in Slippery Rock University about the writing they had their students do, what perhaps should be, how we can coordinate the teaching of writing in the English department with writing instruction in those different areas across the university. You know, the challenges that were involved there. And we had that, as I said, it was published in 2004, and by the time we got to about the spring of 2006, I guess some people in the university thought it was very useful, and so we got that award, I guess.
All right, awesome. And you used to work in journalism, as you've already said. So are you still interested in the media?
Sure, I guess. I mean, you know, I think every citizen should be interested in how the media presents information and should learn to be able to look critically and to think critically about what they see presented in the media in terms of information. And it doesn't have to just involve, of course, government, but all sorts of things. And I think that my experience as working on newspapers for a couple of years had a strong influence on my own writing style. A lot of people complain of academics having sometimes somewhat obtuse writing styles, and that's because, of course, they're trying to write towards an audience of their fellow professionals. And, you know, my feeling was, even in that instance, you can always try to make it as clear and accessible as you possibly can, even to a professional audience. You obviously have to learn that language. You have to learn what counts as convincing or persuasive to that group of people. So, but the other thing, of course, is I think it very much influences my own teaching of things like, for instance, rhetorical theory, helping students learn to see what they understand what they see or interpret what they see through the media by discovering what arguments are being made, whether or not they are persuasive, whether or not they are strong arguments, whether or not we should look askance a lot of what gets said simply because it's not very strong, it's not very convincing when we think about it. So.
And I've gathered that you're very passionate about writing. And so since we were just talking about journalism, whenever you were learning journalism, you were writing for the more traditional print media. Mm-hmm. But do you think that writing styles have changed for the new online media?
Well, I think it definitely does have an influence. The very fact that your writing goes up on a screen, which the reader has to go through by scrolling down or hitting links or whatever, does influence to a certain extent how you organize your material. Perhaps the length of things like the length of your paragraphs even. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, there are other things about writing and trying to write persuasively for a set of readers that doesn't necessarily change simply because it's going up as dancing pixels on a computer screen or whatever either. And but of course the other parts of that is the way documentation might change simply because you have hot links and a text and something that's gone up on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that you can integrate visuals and audio into that, yeah, sure.
Yeah, so you're adding
Although
the
in newspapers
multimedia.
we did have things like illustrations,
Mm-hmm.
photos and captions.
Yeah. All right, well, I think that's all the time we have for today, so thank you so much for joining us. Again, this was Dr. Cornelius Cosgrove. And
Remember what I told you about my mother.
Yeah. So, all right, thanks for coming on the show. It was great to have you.
Okay, thank you.